Hello, KatyKChang here, and welcome to yet another video diary where I review my week's challenges and epiphanies and dive straight into the spiritual lessons surrounded around law of attraction, manifestation, and abundance. So, in this week's video diary, I'm going to discuss the topic around past regrets. Have you ever had a past regret and wondered if you made the right decision? Well, hopefully this video shines some light and is able to answer that question for you. So I'm going to share with you a personal story of mine, and I must thank my mother for this aha moment. A few weeks ago, she actually came up to me and suggested that I get my MBA degree because my cousin, who has an MBA, is now currently making $200,000 at Google. Now, had I not done a lot of spiritual work on myself and learned the lessons on living a more authentic and conscious life, I probably would have been triggered by this. If you're not aware, I hold a doctorate degree in nursing and about 12 years of post high school education. So I spent a lot of years in school collecting all these diplomas. I wasn't well aware that these beliefs of what I wanted were actually highly influenced by my parents. I really was led to believe that these were actually my beliefs. So, not knowing that, not being very conscious, I went ahead and attained many different degrees and I chased after money. And in 2015, I had left a job that wasn't paying too well, but I was completely happy living at the beach, working with some amazing nurses to go after a job that eventually made me extremely miserable. And it was all due to money and title, because I grew up believing that money, title, prestige equates to success, happiness, and self worth. And I'm going to tell you, just after 2 days, my body actually had physical reactions. It was as if, there were all these sirens and flags, just alerting me to get out, that I made the worst decision. And I remember just crying home to my parents, fighting with them, saying, I want to go back to that beach job. And they were fighting with me because, again, they believed that money, success, title, prestige is what you should attain for or attain. And, even though I had these extremely strong visceral reactions, which were actually my intuition speaking to me, I was allowing my parents to influence me, right? Outside forces, as well as my logical brain to reason back into and influence my decision at the time. So instead of leaving and not listening to my intuition, I decided to stay. And that was obviously a horrible decision. I suffered from a lot of anxiety and stress due to workplace bullying, harassment, not to mention, being in a toxic environment where everybody was not happy with their lives and their jobs. And I, end up having, extreme weight gain. I'm a person that has a pretty steady weight, but I managed to gain, a nice amount of weight during my 6 months there. And I recall, at the 6 month mark, after being so miserable and unhappy, I kind of scanned the room for a little bit and I was like, wow, everybody here is not only unhappy, they just are overweight, and actually some can be classified by the CDC as morbidly obese. And I remember consciously at that moment when I finally realized, this is not worth it. No amount of money is worth my help, that I said to myself, I don't want to die at work, because, I was working overtime, and I had to make a long commute every day. So I was easily putting in, more than 40 hours. I was probably putting in 60 hours a week. And I said, if I don't die here, then I will probably become morbidly obese. And that would push me into other medical ailments like, heart disease and type 2 diabetes. So at the time, I just scrambled for any job. And I pretty much took the first job that actually hired me. Many actually laugh because it was a demotion in title and in pay. It was 36% less than what I was making. So I actually cut my salary by almost half. I made my parents pretty pissed off at me, but I didn't care. I just knew I just couldn't stay there. And fast forward a few years later, I now have a heavy mortgage. I have, bills to pay. And I sometimes reflect back at that past employer because, I do check up on some of the nurse practitioners there, and they are making upwards of $300,000 to $400,000. And it's so easy when your current state, you're unhappy, or, it's not exactly perfect, right? You start to look back at some of the decisions you made. Maybe you got out of a relationship and you're like, well, that wasn't so toxic. Maybe I was being too hard on them. And then in this case, I was looking back at my past employer. Well, Katy, it wasn't that bad. Maybe you over exaggerated, right? Because all I could look at was the money, right? And I'm going to tell you, if you ever look back at something that is super inauthentic to you, then God or the universe is going to come back full force and punch you in the face to remind you of your decision, of your correct decision. So I had left that employer in 2016, and fast forward into 2019, I was at the Long Beach Marathon and Half Marathon race. So if you've ever done a race before, you would know that these races start before dawn because it gets really hot later, and you want to complete it, when the temperature is cooler. So it's pitch black. I'm at the corral at 4 in the morning waiting for kickoff at 5 a.m. And there's easily 30 to 60,000 runners. And out of a sea of, darkness, out of 60,000 runners, guess what? I run into a past coworker at that medical center, and I didn't recognize her, but she recognized me, and she called out my name. And we got to talking, and we actually caught up. And she told me this really disheartening story that 2 of the nurse practitioners that used to work with me, they actually passed away from cancer. So this is only 3 years later. And at the time when I had left, from what I know, they didn't have any family medical history or any medical ailments. They were in their 30s and they were healthy. So if it was 3 years later, they would have been only 40 years old and 44 years old, which is really super young to be passing away from anything, right? Let alone cancer. And now that I could see the full picture, I was like, holy cow, first of all, I'm very grateful at, God or, higher being, right, for getting me out of that situation. But holy cow, was my intuition correct, right? I remember, like I said, I scanned the room 6 months into working at that employer, and I said to myself, I don't want to die here. And here, 3 years later, somebody shares a story that 2 people died from cancer. Now, obviously, we can't link it to that work environment, but I could bet you money, right, that a toxic work environment has some weight, right? It played a role into them, unfortunately, being diagnosed with cancer and then eventually passing away, right? So that's my story. Like, I wanted to just share that with you because, right now in your current situation, you might not be able to see why you made that decision and whether or not it was the correct one. But if you were really following your intuition, right, there are spirit guides, there are angels pulling you out into a safer environment, protecting you and trying to elevate you from something that is totally inauthentic to you. Okay? I hope that resonated with you. If it did, please leave a comment and let me know what you learned and how it resonated. And while you're there, you might as well hit the subscribe button as well as the notification bell so that you don't miss out on my videos, which I publish every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Namaste.